Welcome y'all to Robin on the Farm. Today I'm going to show you how to make the easiest and fastest fresh milled flour bread you can make. This is fresh milled flour batter bread. This is a no-knead bread. All you have to do is mix it up, pour it into your loaf pan, and bake it. So it's super simple, but it's also really nutritious, healthy, satisfying, filling, just like all fresh milled flour breads are. But this one's super fast to make. You can have this one done from start to finish in about an hour and a half. And most of that time is just for the batter to sit and then to bake. So it's very, very quick just to throw everything into your bowl, mix it up, and it's ready in no time. This recipe has saved my day so many times, more times than I can count. I've made this loaf hundreds of times. So let me just show you how to make it. I love this bread. I got out my Nutri-Mill Classic Wheat Grinder back there and my hard winter white berries, and I ground up some fresh milled flour. Now you can use any kind of grain that you want for this. You can use kamut, spelt, inkhorn. You can do hard winter white, hard winter red. I like to do a combination of all of those, but usually I'll go with hard winter white because I have thousands of pounds of hard winter white berries stored in my home. So I have a ton of it and I need to use a ton of it. So that's what I usually do. But you can use any combination of grains that you want for this recipe. Down in the description, I'll leave the printable recipe for this fresh milled flour batter bread, and I'll leave it in grams and in cups and spoons, just depending on how you like to bake. To get started, I ground up 480 grams of my wheat berries. That's about 2 2/3 of a cup of wheat berries. And I made this fresh milled flour. This made about 4 cups of fresh milled flour, or it's 480 grams of fresh milled flour. It weighs the same as berries as it does in flour. So I'm going to use this in my bread. So you want 480 grams or 4 cups of fresh milled flour. So I'm going to go ahead and put this right on into my big mixing bowl. Now to my fresh milled flour, I'm going to add some yeast. Now today I'm going to use this instant yeast, but that's just because I pulled this one out of the freezer today. Half the time I use this, half the time I use active dry in this recipe. So any kind of yeast you want to use will be just fine. I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of this instant yeast. I always store my yeast in the freezer. I get it out right in time to make bread. I use it, and then I put it right back into the freezer. I don't have to let it come to room temperature or anything like that. And that way my yeast is just going to stay good for a really good long time. And when you buy it in bulk like this, it's way cheaper than using those little packets or those little jars of yeast that you can find at the grocery store. This is way more economical. So I definitely recommend you buy your yeast like this if you're going to be doing a lot of baking. Stored in the freezer, it's going to last for years and years and years. And our next ingredient is sea salt. You can use any salt that you want, but I like this Redmond's real salt. I really like this salt. So I'm going to use 1 teaspoon of this salt. Be sure you pour it not over your bowl with all your other ingredients in case you over pour it. 1 teaspoon right on into your mixing bowl. Next, I'm going to use some sugar. Now you can use honey if you want to, but truthfully, whenever I make this bread, I'm in a big hurry, and sugar is just easier for me to use. I don't have to wait for the honey. You know, the saying slow as honey, well, that's true. So I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of sugar. You can use a tablespoon of honey if you want it to be just as sweet as mine, or you can even use the 2 tablespoons of honey too. If you want it a little bit sweeter, let it taste a little bit more like honey. But I'm using 2 tablespoons of sugar. And you can use any kind of sweetener you want. You can try monk fruit, you can use maple syrup. There's lots of different things you can use, but I like the sugar just because it's easier, and whenever I make this bread, I need it to be easy and fast. And this next ingredient is optional, so use it if you want, don't use it if you don't want to. I'm going to use 1 large egg. Now I know in the world right now, eggs are kind of hard to come by and kind of pricey, so you don't have to use an egg. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, but I do like the texture and the moisture better of this bread when I use an egg. So I'm going to use the egg. You don't have to if you don't want to. Just going to pour that right on into my mixing bowl. And next we want 2 cups of warm water. So you want this to be 90 to 100 degrees, just some nice warm water. Just pour that right on into your mixing bowl. And to that, I'm going to add a 1/4 cup of milk. I like this with milk. You can also use cream or any kind of milk alternative. If you don't want to use milk, then add another 1/4 cup of water. Just put that right on in there. And those are all of the ingredients to our fresh milled flour batter bread. Now I'm just gonna take a second and mix up these ingredients. I'm gonna use my spurtle and I'm just gonna give this batter a good mix. Making this batter bread takes me back to one of the best times of my life. I was a young mother, I had 4 little kids. My husband and I were farming and ranching full time. We had 1,500 head of beef cattle that we were raising on our farm. We also had a herd of dairy cattle that we were milking. I was raising my own little herd of miniature Jersey cows. We were milking goats. We had sheep and rabbits and chickens. And of course we had the horses and the dogs and everything else. And it was just a really busy time of my life. It was crazy. I had just started homeschooling my oldest kids, and so I was trying to teach them how to read and write. And of course I tried to make everything from scratch. So I had a huge garden. I made all of my own dairy products. I made my own yogurts and butter and all of that. And of course I made bread every day. So sometimes there just wasn't enough time to get it all done. This was the bread that I went to. Now this is a great bread. This isn't like a luxurious, soft, fluffy sandwich bread. This is more of a rustic bread, but it is so satisfying with some butter and some jam, or as an open-faced sandwich. Some tuna salad, chicken salad, egg salad, BLTs are great on this bread. So I love this bread. I always eat like 3 slices when it comes out of the oven. It's so good. Okay, so this is what our batter looks like now. That's the batter to our batter bread. And now I am just gonna put some plastic wrap on top of my bowl, and I'm gonna let this sit on my countertop for 30 minutes. And then it'll be time to pour into the loaf pan and bake it in the oven. So I'll show it to you then. Here's the batter for my fresh milled flour batter bread. It's been sitting on my countertop for about 30 minutes. Now this is the kind of recipe, if you get really busy, this batter can just sit on your countertop for a couple hours and it'll be just fine. Believe me, I have done that. So this is very forgiving. You can let it sit there and it'll be just fine when you're ready to get around to it. Now I just preheated my oven to 350 degrees. Now I'm gonna pour this batter into my loaf pan. This is my 8.5 inch by 4.5 inch cast iron loaf pan. I love my cast iron loaf pans. They don't have any of the coatings or anything like that to get into our foods. I just pour about a tablespoon of oil into my loaf pans, rub it all over the sides and the bottom so that my bread doesn't stick, and it's good to go. So I'm gonna go ahead and just pour this into my loaf pan, and it'll be ready to pop into the oven already. You can see it's just a batter. It is not a ball of dough, it's just a real batter. It's kind of like pancake batter, but it's definitely changed in texture since it's sat here for 30 minutes. I just smoothed out the top of this batter. You want your batter to be about the same height in the middle as it is on the sides, and that'll just help it to bake really evenly. And that is it. Our batter bread is ready to go into the oven. So I'm gonna throw this into the oven and let it bake at 350 degrees for 55 minutes. Now yours could go anywhere from 50 to 60 minutes, just depending on your oven, but mine is always about 55 minutes. So I'll show it to you when it's ready. Here's my fresh milled flour batter bread fresh out of the oven. It baked at 350 degrees for 55 minutes exactly. It's nice and brown on the top. This looks great to me, but you can let yours brown as much as you want. Now I'm gonna let this sit in the loaf pan for about 5 to 10 minutes before I get it out. That'll just help it to come out easier. My fresh milled flour batter bread came out of the oven about 5 minutes ago, and I'm ready to turn it out of the loaf pan. Now, if I oiled up the loaf pan well enough, then this should just slide right on out. And it did. Oh, I love that. So there it is. If yours doesn't slide out of your loaf pan easily, just use a knife and go around the edge of your loaf pan, and it should slide right out after that. Look how good this looks. It looks baked to perfection. It's a nice golden color. It looks really good and it smells really good. I'm gonna let this cool off just for a few minutes, and then I'm gonna cut into it and we'll check out the inside. Okay, it looks good. I really do love this bread. Not only does it take me back to the busiest but happiest days of my life, it just tastes really good. It's really satisfying, and I think it's just because it's so healthy. It's really good for you. So I'm gonna go ahead and put my bread away until dinner time. I'm gonna store this in my beeswax bread bag. These are beeswax bread bags that my daughters and I hand make together. This is our vintage chickens pattern, and isn't it cute? These are infused with organic beeswax, and I'm just trying to keep plastics off of my foods as much as possible, and I feel like this is just a really good way to do it. These are eco-friendly, reusable, sustainable, and healthy. So I will leave a link down below for these beeswax bread bags and also for the printable recipe for this fresh milled flour batter bread. Thank you so much for being here with me on Robin on the Farm. I really appreciate y'all and for being here and supporting me. I will see you next time on Robin on the Farm.
Robin's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make that dough. With flour on her apron, loving each knead, ground wheat fresh, sowing her seed. The smell of fresh bread rises in the air. Simple life without a care.